So what you see is a post that I've made it um, aware of the battle, which was understanding. Understanding is the battle. You know, they say no one is part of the battle, but understanding is the battle. You have to understand, because, collectively we tend to have a lack of understanding, especially, when it comes to conceptualizing life and conceptualizing, what our theory of, what righteousness is or what God is or even what divine is. But we tend to have a misunderstanding, and that misunderstanding creates miscommunication. So, this post, I wanted to come back to it because, it says a lot in it, it says a lot in it. And, to bring it to full scale, you can just zoom in on everything that's being stated here, which means to be truly empathetic. Everybody is somebody, and everything is something. Nothing is nothing, and nobody is nobody. And what that means is, if you are to treat others as you yourself want to be treated, or if you are to love your neighbor as you love yourself, you have to feel what your neighbor feel, and you have to be able to see things from their perspective as well. This is what it means to be empathetic. See, a lot of us, we misinterpret the meaning of empathy and sympathy as well. We sympathize with people based on their circumstances or their situation. Maybe if someone was handicapped or wheelchair bound, or have a certain physical deformity, or that's maybe just have a lack of natural or normality to them, we normally sympathize with them. So we share in that ability to sympathize with people. But empathy is to put ourselves in their place. So if you wanted to go and get the definition of empathy, the ability to understand and share the feeling of another. So you understand and share their feelings as well. This is when you cry, I cry. I cry along with you. When you smile, I smile. I smile along with you. These are expressions of how empathy is carried out and conveyed through people. When what hurts you hurts me. What makes you smile makes me smile as well. What you endure, I endure as well. So these are, the telltale signs of how empathy is conveyed. Empathy is the ability to emotionally understand what other people feel, see things from their point of view, and imagine yourself in their place. Essentially, it is putting yourself in someone else's position and feeling what they are feeling. That is what empathy is. A lot of us, we proclaim to be empaths or empathetic towards each other, but we don't embrace the whole role of empathy. Things that others may sidestep, you walk full head on into, because it's just a part of you. To turn that off means that you no longer want to empathize or rationalize with people that might need a form of understanding in order for you to, share in that understanding. You tend to, you know, not just categorize, but you tend to give your empathy to, certain individuals when it's something that is supposed to be shared with everyone. Because when you go back to, the saying that everybody is somebody, everybody is somebody. So when you are truly empathetic, everybody is somebody. There's not one person that you exclude from empathizing with, as opposed to you pinpointing or picking out particular people that you want to empathize with. So what I wanted to discuss was, in the media, there's been, talks of, a few brothers that passed away, during Mother's Day weekend. I believe it was Mother's Day, because I'm not celebratorial of anything, because every day is a day. Every day is the same as the average day, and they're all worthy of praise, because these are days that are given to us, by life. Life is the dictator of these days. If we do not, or if we're not amongst the living, then we do not enjoy or celebrate these days. So that's one thing that I wanted to clarify about, certain or particular days. Some days was prescribed for you to keep holy, which means that you keep them pure, and you keep them, you regard them in a certain light. But Mother's Day and Father's Day and Christmas and New Year's and New Year's Eve and birthdays and stuff like that wasn't, amongst those days that were to be regarded with a certain holy veneration. So, we had the Philly rapper. I seen some of his content on Facebook a few years ago, and I liked it, his delivery, and the things that he spoke about, and just recently, this happened. There was a shooting that involved him, and if you was to listen to the music that he was conveying, a lot of it was describing his environment, and by him describing his environment, this gave way to leaders, people in a position of leadership, to zero in and hone in on these conditions, and try in some form to improve them, try to improve these conditions in these environments. And he spoke about a lot of things. That he spoke about was the effect that taking the lives of the young brothers, that he spoke about how it affected their mothers. And here you have a quote from his mother, where she was heartbroken. She was heartbroken because this is what it does. It affects the mothers. And if we aren't able to empathize with, how the stealing of lives, this is what it is, it's the stealing of lives. This is why you see, the background. Poor black folks keep Jewish lawyers paid. In the hood, life is just a dirty game. We stealing lives from these young brothers. What a shame. We stealing lives from them. So we're stealing lives. from these particular people, because we have, a distorted perception of our reality, and our reality is become a survival um, thing. It's not about a living thing. It's about a survival thing. I watched a few videos last night from Chicago rappers, just to understand their mindset just a little bit more, just a little bit more of why the things that's going on in Chicago is still going on in Chicago. Because for me, it's more or less a setup, as opposed to it being the nature of things, the way that they are being carried out. I see it more in a light of a setup, for a particular people, for a particular people. First you have to understand that this establishment has been established on betrayal. We have to understand that this establishment has been established on betrayal. If we go back to the story of Christopher Columbus, or Cristobal Colon, we will understand that there was a people that was welcoming, and then those people that was welcoming was ultimately betrayed, and that betrayal led to the founding of a particular country. So we do have to understand that an establishment has been established on betrayal, and it goes further back into history, and we have to betray the trust of the betrayer, because the betrayer trusts us to betray each other. If that makes any sense, the betrayal is a part of the betrayer's method of control and conquest. So we don't understand that if there's a setup, then it's being set up by those that you entrust to not betray you. So we seen two other brothers that passed away just a couple of days ago. I believe their name is Muna Duke. Muna Duke, or something like that. Just type his name in, it'll show you. Respect who were Muna Duke and Young in the old block. Old block is where I believe Chief Keef and a few other rappers like King Von and these other artists was from. So they made that area kind of well known and established in the music industry. So there was a lot of people coming out from Old Block and under the banner of OTF or Little Durk and his squad, or however you have it, but they come from a chaotic environment that was prone to gang violence and a perpetual ongoing gang war that stemmed over maybe more than 20 years, if that's just being minimal with the numbers. But it's been an ongoing thing in Chicago where young people have been just cut their life just been cut short from them. And the reason why it's important to talk about it is because there's people that we just mourn the losses of them. We just RIP and all that's sad, and but we don't come up with solutions as to how to prevent these things from further escalating and allowing them to resolve on their own volition. That's not what we allow that what it we allow it to do, because you know with with these crimes and these casualties, there's those that profit off of the crime and those that profit off of the casualties, where I stated that Jewish lawyers, are paid off of poor black people in the hood that are charged with certain crimes. They seek to employ the best lawyers, and it's kind of like not a known fact but a known assumption that Jewish lawyers make the best lawyers, and when you do employ them, they come with a hefty price. So you're paying for the best representation, and that best representation has been known to come from Jewish attorneys. So they profit off of the crime that black people are subjected to and put themselves in because of the reality that they live in. Then you also have the jails that profit the off of harboring these people that commit these acts. Then you also have the funeral homes, and those are the funeral directors that profit off of these casualties. So this is a business that incorporates a lot of people and generates a lot of income, revenue for multiple people, and that's excluding certain other people from out of the equation, but they actually benefit from it as well. So what I see is there's people that are prominent and public figures in the Chicago scene, and they come from out of these areas, and they have been put on a poster as they obtain celebrity status. And these are things that, when you go back into the statement that I've stated, to be truly empathetic, everybody is somebody and everything is something. Nothing is nothing and nobody is nobody. So when you're dealing with a level of celebrity itself contradicts this statement, because once they're a celebrity, they're somebody and you are nobody. So these aren't your neighbors. These are not, when you're to love your neighbors as you love yourself. These are people that are taken away from you, taken from amongst you, and made a certain social status that separates their status from your status, which becomes they become not a part of your peers. This is something that they actually sign up for. When Shannon Sharp was interviewing Damon Wayans, he stated, that once they started to make money, they was taken away and was encouraged to not interact with other people in that was still in that situation, that was still in those neighborhoods and communities. So they had to separate themselves and move out of the communities. So what the people tend to do is not understand that the celebrityism is part of the problem. It's a part of the problem, because they get scrutinized and looked at in a different light than a non-celebrity would get looked at. And you can't, I'm not saying you can't empathize with them, but you can't look at them with the same type of empathy that you would a non-celebrity, because they would have different results when it comes to certain avenues that they travel down. And going back to LGBTQ, there was a lot of celebrities that had an ability to either assist him in his attempt to be the voice of the youth, to be the voice of the youth, to attempt to help him carry out a movement that would have brought a lot of attention to the growing problem that was that plagued his community. He spoke about it and wanted to bring some sort of light to it. Then you have other brothers that's from Philly. I've seen Allen Iverson and Gilly the Kid, speak about this particular situation. And like I said, they was in a position to further instruct this particular individual's vision. If he had a vision of young brothers getting their mind right, getting focused, and being more of a pillar in the community as one that destroys the community, but being pillars of righteousness or correction in the communities, and just being a sound mind in the community during all of the violence and it's drugs and money being exchanged, and we don't take into consideration the role that the generations that came before us played in our current conditions, in our current situations, in the way that things are being constructed in our communities. So as the current generation sees the coming generation, we don't take into account our role in the way that they are. And this is something that we need to address collectively, not on an individual scale, but on a collective scale, because amongst people that need leadership, I would say that if you look around and you would see that there's people with leaders. When it comes to America itself, the president is the leader of America. And that you don't want to make it a racial thing, but that's with a certain class of Americans, that's their leader, where they actually have hand-on leadership. Then when you look at religious, in the religious aspect of it, then you would see, if you look at the Jews, then you would see that rabbis are a form of leadership for them. rabbis, where it's structured, and um it's a given that these are sources of leadership in their communities or in their religious makeup. These are forms of leadership. But as far as a particular people that tend to suffer a lot, they really don't have any leadership. So we have to establish of some form of leadership, in the history, amongst a certain people. Their leadership, or people that was in a leadership position, was always cut down. That only gave them an indication that they need to be without leadership in order for them to be controlled and manipulated in a fashion that's beneficial to other people. So this should be a reason why they seek righteous and just and sound leadership, because they have a history of those that are in a position to be leaders always being targeted and always being in some form of fashion, either executed or either being publicly humiliated, in some form, whether it's Dr. King, whether it's Malcolm X, whether it's Marcus Garvey, whether it's anybody that was in a position to be a leadership and to be a, someone that brought a certain change to a people that need to be in a particular state, But I state that to say that we do have those that allow themselves to be on the front line and speak and give a certain knowledge to people, and it's more so entertainment than anything else. These are people. You got to understand. First, it's not the celebrities' fault. The celebrities is really not their fault. It's the people's fault for wanting celebrities. The wanting to be entertained by celebrities, and once you obtain a certain celebrity status, you can't identify with being a regular. First you can't identify with that. So the first thing you do is made a celebrity. The first thing, once you're made a celebrity, then you become out of touch with the reality of certain realities. And this is something that we see happen over and over and over again. In my community, we seen Fetty Wap become a celebrity, but before he was a celebrity, he was right amongst us, and I was able to even give him some wisdom. Once I started to see him become what you call big-headed, I got into his inbox and I told him, like, yo, bro, don't allow that to get you like that. And sure enough, I seen it like firsthand with an artist that became somebody that was amongst us, and then became a celebrity, and then everything changed. His involvement in the hood, it stopped. It was cut short after he obtained a certain social and financial status. He stopped frequenting certain areas that he would normally frequent, and we are not encouraged to improve our environments, especially when we come from poverty. We leave poverty and allow poverty to become more of a problem to communities. But we have to get into the 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 the, the process of constructing, because I stated before that we are constructors. We construct, not destroy. And because we reversed roles, we become the destructive force by not allowing ourselves to improve and construct things, but allow everything else outside of us to construct things. And that construction becomes, it becomes inauthentic, it's unauthentic construction, because it's constructed by something else, and it's not organically, created, in these communities. We construct them inorganically, and that's the reason why we don't have any personal connection to it, because it's not genuine. It's not a genuine construction. So, we have certain things that can improve, our current states, especially, a particular people. We have certain things and certain people with certain knowledge that is able, if given and acted upon, it would be the end of a certain reign of terror on them. And what I'm trying to tell you is that, some of us actually have solutions, to the problem. But do we get light, and is our wisdom being received? And being that it's received, is it applied? Is it applied? So, being useful has a purpose. Everything, especially when you're dealing with, solving problems. If you're not able to solve problems, and you're a problem solver, basically a peacemaker, which the children of God are called, then you will feel, useless. You will have no purpose, because, your solutions aren't being even revered or given any kind of, consideration. But, that's not, discouraging. That's just a form of, breaking the spirit of either a person or a people, by not allowing them to fully experience their potential, and we do know that that's something that happens. We do know that, from history. And we have to be aware of what life is, and how delicate and fragile life is, and to know that it doesn't matter who it is. No one, especially people that don't understand life, has the right or even the authority to take life from anyone, especially if you don't understand life, and this is what's happening. There's a lot of people with misunderstandings of life that's cutting down lives, and they're, if there was no such thing as not being able to touch and take lives, there'll be no statement of, touch not my anointed and do my prophets no harm. That's stated. That is something that's stated and that's widely known, and you never know who is in a position of being anointed and being prophets. Just because they don't say that they're anointed or that they're prophets doesn't mean that they're actually prophets, you know. And especially when it comes to children of God or God's children, which, you know, are children of life, you know, and know that they come from life and know that they have a certain purpose in life. You know, these are those that you would actually call the children of God. And, you know, God is life. You know, whether it's, you got to understand, the world is a living thing. This world that we live on is living. You know, it's a living, breathing thing. You know, if you don't understand that, I'm not sure, you know, what type of world you're living on. But, you know, life produces life. So, you know, if you're able to grow crops, which is a form of producing life, and you're able to sustain life on this particular plane of existence, then this is a living thing. You know, death does not contain life. Life contains life. So we have to understand the importance of this world that we live on, and how it's a part of our duty to acknowledge life, and to live life, not survive life. So back to what I was saying about, you know, a lot of these artists that I was seeing in Chicago, they wasn't glorifying, you know, their deceased members. They're actually glorifying the fact that they're still surviving, you know, the onslaught of the crime and the environments they live in. You know, they glorify that. That's what becomes of the gangsters and gangster rap and the gangster way of living. It's about surviving, you know, harsh realities. When those realities no longer exist, what becomes of that survival mindset? You know, that's one thing I believe that certain people are afraid of, you know, is what happens after, you know, we are given the opportunity to be at peace with each other, you know. And one thing that keeps us in a state of chaos is that we're in a money hustle, a hustle and bustle for money and positioning ourselves. And that is part of the survival mentality, you know, to accumulate and to acquire and to position, you know. So, you know, with that, we wanted to, you know, just shed light to, you know, what's actually being, you know, seen and what's being discussed online. Because, you know, I've seen Facebook posts on Facebook about Muna Duke and the guy Youngin, and under their posts, because they was associated with a certain gang and a street type of mentality. A lot of people, especially not to make it a racial thing, a lot of Caucasians, they was, you know, mocking that. They was laughing at it, saying another one bites the dust, and, you know, just you know, basically kind of, you know, laughing at, you know, the state and conditions of those people out there, you know. And like I told you, it's basically a setup, meaning that it's not organically driven like that. It's inorganically driven like that. And, you know, the gang and the warfare and the the what they call backdooring, all that stuff has a root, and it's a root cause, and we have to uproot anything that's planted, that's planted there, in order for there to be any kind of cessation, like for it to cease. You have to uproot it from the roots, because it'll keep growing. If you just cut the top, it'll keep growing. If you cut the branches, it'll keep growing back. But you have to literally uproot it. But that's just something that I bear witness, to, and you know, like I said, I seen content from this guy, and he was viral. It was a viral song. It was a viral freestyle, and he went in, and he gave you the reality of Philly. And one of the realities of Philly was, how it affects, mothers, how these crimes and these acts affects, the mothers. You should empathize with the mothers that have to, bury their children, and not to put anything on the fathers, but the fathers are being, cut down as well. So this is the reason why it becomes the hardship on mothers, and for this to actually happen on Mother's Day, which, like I said, is something that I don't even celebrate. I don't celebrate anything. I celebrate life, and I celebrate it every day. So me, I live in a different reality. And what you have to understand about God is that God lives in a whole different, another reality. If God lived in this reality would be a lot better than what it actually is. So God is not in this reality. This is it's a staged reality. It's created by man. This reality is created by man. So once you create a reality created by God, that's when God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's when you're dealing with the reality of God. So first you have to understand that there's no God here. Doesn't matter what religion try to, God is this and God, but if God is not here, then how do you adhere to a God? When they're talking about godless people, that means that a people without God. It doesn't matter, like I said, doesn't matter what religion you are in, Muslim, Christian, Judas, Baptist, whatever. You don't have God here because you're not living in the reality of God. And I just needed to state that because, we do get it confused. We can easily misconstrue certain meanings and believe that we are holding dear to God when we are actually not. We have the prayer hands and the RIPs, but we don't allow people to LIP while they're here, to live in peace. What it wouldn't have been nothing for, Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson, to come get this young brother, take him with him, as an artist, before his lectures, give you, a breakdown of raps, just keep giving you raps, we're going to speak to this university. I want you to be prepared. I'm going to have you come on before me and entertain them with some of your conscious rap. Then I'm going to, rip the stage and, give them people a little bit of, black, but, these aren't, like I said, true leaders. True leaders, would have saw him and, would have took him to greater heights and created a ripple effect to others, and would have started to go back to these environments that were plagued with crime and violence and all sorts of broken mothers and broken homes. They would have went back and repaired them. But and that goes with Gilly the Kid as well. He experienced his son, tragically shot and killed in Philadelphia, and their main concerns was going to the Philadelphia Eagle game, and our celebrities, they sit courtside at basketball games, and like I said, they're the enemies of the people if they're not improving the people's conditions in these communities. They're not their neighbors because they do not empathize with them. They do not share in the destruction that plagues certain communities. So if they turn their back towards those events, they become a part or associated with the enemy. They betray their own people by not going back for their people, by not going and improving or even trying to. You could donate money and give money and all that, but you need your energy, your spirit, your influence to uplift a people, to discourage a people from a certain lifestyle and encourage them towards a different lifestyle. And this isn't something that you're being a dreamer about. This is something that can actually happen. There's enough people with enough resources to bring forth the change that's needed to a people. It's enough. There's enough people. If you don't like the way that the music industry is, if it's a demonic industry, it's a crooked industry, then you have enough people in that to change it, to make it a different thing. This is what I was saying about Cat Williams and Monique. If they didn't like that, they can make their own. They have enough fans, they have enough fan base, they well established. Make your own stuff where nobody has to go through those procedures and those processes of doing what people believe they do to get these parts. Same thing with the music industry. Change it so that you don't have to do what artists do to get these recording deals. So there's enough people with enough resources that can bring forth the change that's needed to a people, as opposed to us continuously experiencing this harsh reality that we live in, and because we're still amongst the living, we believe that we're actually surviving this reality. But the thing is, we're not. We're just we're not, because everybody is going to experience a fate one day, someday. We are promised that. But yeah, I wanted to share that because there's this is not going to be the last, and it's definitely not the first. And we don't take into consideration that there's a solution for this, and the solution is a simple solution, where again we have everybody is somebody. When everybody is somebody, then we start to take into account the fact that your feelings matter, his feelings matter, her feelings matter, When everything is something, when not just jewelry is something, not just clothes is something, but everything is something. Everything is something, but nothing is nothing. Now, if jewelry is nothing, that's nothing. If fame is nothing, that's nothing. If a house or a mansion is nothing, that's nothing. And if nobody is nobody, then nobody is excluded. You know what I mean? Nobody is nobody. You know what I mean? Who is he? He's somebody. Who is she? She's somebody. Nobody is nobody. You know? So these are things that we have to get to. That is what we have to get to. If we are not getting to that, then, you know, we're going to perpetuate this state of is inequality. It's inequality and dog eat dog. You know, we're going to perpetuate that. You know, this crab in the bucket mentality, because everyone is in a hustle to be somebody. But if everybody is already somebody, then where, you know, where do we try to get to if everybody is somebody? There, and like I said, there's, you know, a solution to that. You know, there's a solution into how everybody can be somebody, you know, because if everybody was somebody, then there'll be no celebrities. And that's terrifying to celebrities. That's terrifying. No, I want to be somebody and I want them to be nobody, but I'm somebody. That's terrifying to celebrities. That's terrifying to the people that own celebrities. That is terrifying. You know, that is tormenting, you know, celebrities. You know. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. You know. I just wanted to share that. Peace.